it's not about just a desire for money. It's not about greed. It's about dignity. When a system asks you to give your best ideas, your emotional energy, your time, everything you have, while refusing to value those things appropriately, it erodes your sense of self-worth. It's not about just making more money for money's sake. It is about having your labor respected and compensated fairly.
Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor, the podcast. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. In 2019, I was a political science professor who was fed up with the stress and hostility of academia, not to mention the low pay. I left my tenure-track job and went from barely surviving to thriving as a freelance academic editor. Today, I own Acadia Editing Services, an editing and coaching business that brings in 6 figures a year. In this podcast, I'll discuss the challenges of academia, what academic editing involves, and what life as a freelancer looks like. If you're willing to jump outside your comfort zone, it is possible to find joy, true flexibility, and a profitable and rewarding career as an academic editor. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to Leaving Academia, Becoming a Freelance Editor. I'm your host, Paulina Cossette. I want to start today by saying something very clearly. If you are burned out, if you are exhausted, if you are imagining a life outside of academia, you are not broken, and you are definitely not alone. Everything I'm going to share with you in this episode comes directly from academics themselves. Faculty, adjuncts, postdocs, PhDs, people in grad school, people with tenure, people working on tenure, full professors, endowed professors, a wide range of folks from all over the world. They are ideas people. They are people who care deeply about their students and their institutions and their work. They are people who have given years, sometimes decades of their lives to this work. And when they signed up to receive more information about my program, Becoming an Academic Editor or Coach, I asked them one question. What was going on in your life that brought you here today? I have gotten over 700 responses to that question in the last year or so. When I first started asking it, I thought that I would just get 2-word answers, something very, very brief, or no answers at all. And what I found is that some people want to share their story. It's just a little Google form. It's anonymous, and people talk, people share. Their responses are raw. They are unfiltered. And in many cases, they're devastating. All of the quotes that I'm going to share with you today are real, but I have lightly edited some of them where necessary to preserve the anonymity of the respondents. This episode is not about telling you what to do with your career. It's not about telling you that academia is evil and you have to leave tomorrow. For some people, academia works. And if that's you, that's great. Truly, if you are happy in your academic job, I am happy for you. So I'm not trying to shame the people who stay, not at all. But the reality of the current situation, and honestly, I think it's been this way for years, if not decades, is that academia is broken as a system. The institutions are designed to take advantage of people. And my reasoning for sharing these quotes with you today is first, so if you're in the thick of it and you are feeling the same way as these folks, if you're burnout, you're exhausted, you feel broken, is for you to know that you're not alone. Even though you feel like you can't talk about it at work, your colleagues aren't going to support you, you're not alone. I've got the data. I think the young people say I've got the receipts or something like that. Anyway, you're not alone. And if you are someone who's happy, I just want you to know how other people feel. And maybe, if you're planning to stay, maybe you can help do something to make it better. I don't know if that's possible at this point, but that's an episode for another day. So, the takeaway here before we dive in is that academia has taught so many of us that if the job, if the lifestyle, if the system isn't working for you, it must be because you are not strong enough. You are not smart enough. You are not passionate enough. There's something wrong with you. But over the last year, as I've read each response that comes in to this question, I've realized that when you see this many people telling the same story, it becomes very clear that this isn't an individual failure. It is a systemic one. So today I'm going to walk you through the 5 most common themes in the data. These are the 5 top reasons that people who responded to my question said they are leaving or trying to leave. And I'm going to read you some direct quotes that stood out to me as being particularly interesting. That's not a great word for it, but as being particularly moving, is particularly evocative of what's happening. And as you listen, you might recognize yourself in one of these themes or maybe all of the themes. And if you do, I just want you to know this. There is nothing wrong with you for wanting more, for knowing that you are meant for more. So let's start with the first theme. This is definitely the top theme in the data, as well as what I hear from people that I talk with every day about why they're thinking about leaving academia or why they left. And that's burnout. This is not, I'm tired at the end of the semester burnout. It is not, I just need a vacation burnout. This is burnout that seeps into your body. It destroys your health. It demolishes your sense of self. One person answered my question very simply. I feel like a shell of a human. Another person said, I'm an assistant professor and I am tired. And then there were longer stories, the ones where you can hear the panic, you can hear the grief that is motivating these words. Somebody wrote, I'm graduating with a humanities PhD and unemployed. And they had the crying emoji. I'm so burned out that my health can't handle a 9 to 5 and I'm panicking. Let's stop there for a second. My health can't handle a 9 to 5 job. That is not a personal failing. You do not get to the point in your life. It's very possible this person is relatively young. I don't know who they are, but they're finishing their PhD. They could be relatively young. You do not get to the point in your life where your health is so bad that you can't work a 9 to 5 because there's something wrong with you. There's something wrong with the 6+ years that you've been working so hard that your health is failing. Your nervous system in that situation has been pushed past its limits for too long. Here's another quote. I've been a visiting professor for 10 years. Now I'm stuck between jobs. I'm feeling so burnt out and taken advantage of. Over and over again, people talk about being exhausted in ways that feel permanent. You can't just sleep this one off. You can't just take a weekend and sleep in and feel better. They report thinking about work constantly. They report never being able to fully rest, even when they aren't technically working. And so burnout here isn't just about the workload, right? It's about the emotional labor. It's about having to carry student crises. How many times have we all had students crying in our office about something? It's about institutional dysfunction and impossible expectations. And it's about having to carry all of this without support or recognition or any kind of relief. This type of burnout is about giving everything you have to a system that keeps asking for more. Many people described physical symptoms, anxiety, autoimmune issues, chronic stress, panic attacks, insomnia. I had a lot of that when I was still teaching. And what struck me again is that almost no one framed this as temporary. They didn't say this year is hard. They said, I can't do this anymore. So burnout here isn't a phase. It is a warning sign to you that something is very, very wrong. And for many academics, this is the first crack in the story that we've all been told for so long. The system, the institutions, the leadership, whatever you want to call it, they tell us that if we just work harder, if we love the work more, if we care less about ourselves, if we just hold on a little longer, things will get better. But they don't. And I know that because most of the people in my program have tenure. And what I have been starting to realize is that we are sold this idea that if we just stay until tenure, everything will be fine. It'll all be easier. And so we do. We listen, we trust, we work and we work and we work into that hole of despair. And we get tenure. And then we turn around and we look around us and we say, this is it? This is what I killed myself for? This is why I worked so hard? And finally the veil is lifted and we realized it was a scam and it's all a sham. And so we get that tenure, that holy grail, and we realize it's time to go. Theme number 2. This theme shows up in the data almost as often as burnout, and I think the two are very clearly connected. And that theme is money, but it's not about just a desire for money. It's not about greed. It's about dignity. People talked in the data about being profoundly underpaid, especially given their level of education and experience and the level of responsibilities that they carry. One person wrote, quote, undervalued and underpaid for my education. Another said, reduced hours at university, but still expected to work more than I'm paid. One of the biggest surprises for me when I was in academia is that I would spend years working toward tenure and promotion and only get a raise of $2,000. No one prepares us for this. No one tells us this in grad school. We know approximately what we might earn if we land a tenure track job when we leave grad school. We know that tenure track jobs are few and far between. We know all of those things, but nobody talks about the fact that you get tenure and you get promoted, and it's basically a handshake and a thank you for your service. And I mean, $2,000 after 6+ years of work? Are you kidding me? That's nothing. And there's no COLAs, so your salary isn't keeping up with inflation anyway. Okay. If they did tell us this in grad school, we would realize that the whole thing is a scam and we'd quit before we destroyed our mental and physical health. So again, I feel very strongly about this, but I think it's important to say out loud all of the stuff that we are recognizing in our bodies, that our bodies are feeling that this is wrong, something is wrong, I can't do this anymore. And to say it out loud so that it counteracts the lies that we are all told by our mentors and our advisors and our department chairs and certainly our administrators. Here's another response to my survey. I love teaching and researching, but the pay is inadequate and the working environment is divisive. This sentence, I think when you dig into it, you can see the grief that underlies this statement. I love the work, but I'm not getting paid enough. The environment is divisive. I cannot survive inside the system. That's not part of the quote. That's my interpretation of it. I love the work, but I can't do this anymore. Many people described being expected to perform large amounts of unpaid labor, whether it's service work or mentoring additional students or emotional support for students, committee work, attending events for student affairs. I remember being told that we had to start recruiting high school students to come to the college. Are you kidding me? No. I remember being asked to donate money to the school. No. Not happening. And all of this is framed as entirely normal, as being part of the job, as being service to the university. No, sorry. Meanwhile, your salary is stagnating, your workload's increasing, and the cost of living keeps going up. Several respondents talked about struggling financially despite having advanced degrees, about being unable to save money, about being unable to plan for the future, about being unable to imagine a stable future. And so the message that you are getting from your institutions, everyone out there, is that your expertise is endless, but your compensation is optional. We want you to do all the things, but it's not important that we pay you for them. And over time, the effect of that is deeper than just burnout or being bitter about being underpaid. It is a moral injury. When a system asks you to give your best ideas, your emotional energy, your time, everything you have, while refusing to value those things appropriately, it erodes your sense of self-worth. And I see this every day in people who come into my program. Somebody asked me today, what is there? She's thinking of enrolling in BAE in our next cohort. And she said, what's the number one reason that people in your program fail to land clients? And I said, the number one reason is a lack of belief in themselves. So many people come into my program becoming an academic editor or coach, and they feel like they can't do this, that they're not smart enough, that they're not talented enough, that they're not creative enough. Their sense of self-worth is gone because of what they've been through. And we have to work together to build that back up. I have them do homework, not like real homework, but like posting on LinkedIn, journaling about their feelings, journaling about who they want to serve in their business, about what they're passionate about. And through that internal work, they are able to build back their self-worth, to build back their joy, to build back their passion for teaching and for research and for writing. But it takes work because academia has broken you and it's ground you down. And so when we think about the second theme of money, it's not about getting rich. It's not about just making more money for money's sake. It is about having your labor respected and compensated fairly. It's about no longer donating your lives to institutions that treat your work as disposable. And I think once you see that clearly, it becomes very difficult to unsee it. Theme number 3. This one is related to feelings of fear. And specifically, it's about fear of the job market. And I mean, we've talked for years, certainly since I was in grad school around the Great Recession and the stock market crash in '08, of, being afraid that the market was terrible. Everybody has complained that the market is terrible, but I think obviously we're seeing right now a completely new situation. And it's not just in the US, it's all over the world. And so for many people who are either they've left academia or they're thinking about leaving, they're getting ready to make a plan B. The decision to leave is not a choice. It is something that is happening to them. And so people in my data set talked a lot about instability. They talked about short-term contracts, vanishing positions, departments and programs being cut, institutions, entire colleges closing. We know this is happening. I don't have to tell you this. One person wrote, quote, "I'm feeling trapped in a place I don't want to be because there are so few academic jobs in my subfield. I haven't been able to move up." Another said possible RIF, which of course is reduction in force, looking for a new direction. And so we see not just people in academia, not just people who are still in higher ed coming to me and applying to this program to turn their skills into a business. We also see academics who have already left academia and are either in industry or government. And of course, they've lost their positions because of what's going on politically right now. But like I said, it's not just US higher ed that's in crisis. Here's a quote from somebody in the UK. "I'm based in the UK and have a PhD in sociology. I'm in the last 6 months of a fellowship, which should have been my route into a permanent academic position. But in the meantime, the sector has fallen into crisis. My current institution has informed me they can't give me a new contract. There are widespread redundancies and very few new jobs being advertised anywhere. This means I have little choice but to leave academia, but I'd been thinking about doing so anyway to achieve a better work-life balance." Another quote, "I currently have a tenure track job as an English professor. I enjoy my job, but I'm contemplating a career change because I want to move back to Canada. I've been trying to get an academic job in Canada since 2019, but the job market is even more difficult there than in the US." I don't want this to get too depressing. There is hope, right? There is hope. But I do think it's important to call attention to these statements and what's going on around the world. I also think it's very important to acknowledge that these are people. In all of these quotes, these are people who did exactly what they were told to do. We did the publishing, we did the teaching, we learned how to be better teachers, we learned how to mentor students. We've worked our butts off to be what we were told to be, to build expertise, to contribute value. But the rug is still being pulled out from under us, and we have no stability. Here's two more quotes from people in the US. "I worked a number of part-time faculty roles until I earned a lectureship at a major state university, but then I was laid off due to budget cuts." One more. "I'm a former faculty member and former senior academic administrator. My college closed due to financial constraints." So many people, again, described doing everything right, earning the degree, publishing, teaching, serving, only to find that the academic job market just could not hold them. The tenure track jobs are disappearing. More and more teaching is being pushed into adjunct roles, which offer disgustingly low pay and no benefits. And tenure is no longer something that keeps you safe. Even people who are currently employed talked in their responses to my survey about living with constant anxiety, wondering whether their department would exist in 5 years or 3 years or 1 year, whether their position would be cut, whether they could rely on this career in the long term. That kind of uncertainty changes how you live your life. It affects your health. You aren't able to plan for the future. You aren't able to rest. You don't feel safe in your own home, in your own career, in your own life. And what's especially painful to me is that academia still sells the idea of stability long after it has stopped delivering stability. We are still selling prospective PhD students on this dream. For many of the people who shared their stories, they came to this realization very slowly, and it was devastating for them. It has been devastating. They are taking months, if not years, to recuperate and recover from the burnout, from the realization that the system is no longer going to support you. Leaving academia in this context isn't about ambition. It's not about making more money, as I said. It is about wanting a life that isn't always one budget meeting away from collapse. And I think we know that many schools out there are in that situation right now. The fourth theme is the one that I think people struggle the most to put into words. It's not exhaustion. It's not the money. It's not even the instability. It is betrayal. Many people didn't say that they stopped loving their work. They said they stopped trusting the institution. One person wrote, "The culture grew exceptionally toxic on my campus." Another said, "I'm a full professor who has had enough of the bullshit and bullying in higher education." Finally, quote, 29 years of abuse in the workplace. 29 years. Somebody else said they were a full professor. That's not a bad year. That's not an off semester. That's decades of putting up with treatment and behavior that nobody should have to put up with. They stayed, they believed, they endured, but it doesn't get better. For many people, it doesn't get better. Across the data, people talked about hostile leadership, bullying administrators, and decision making that felt completely disconnected from the values that universities claim to stand for. They talked about surveillance instead of support, metrics instead of mentorship, bureaucracy instead of intellectual life. We all know this is true. We are sold on higher ed and teaching and being a scholar as promising one set of values and priorities. And when we get there, we find that it's a classic bait and switch. It is entirely different than what we were sold on. One quote that hit me particularly hard was this one: "Academia has become toxic and unbearable, but I don't know what else I'm qualified to do." I've said many times in this podcast and in my other public talks and posts that I believe academia sets you up to fail if you try to leave. They make sure that you think you have no skills, that you have no idea what other options are out there, and to believe that you're not qualified to do anything else. And it breaks my heart when I read people in this data say that, or when I see people in my community in BAE say that they're not qualified to do anything else. Because like I said earlier, you are exceptionally well qualified. You have skills. I always say on this podcast, you have the skills you need to do something different. You can teach, you can mentor, you can coach, you can write, you can edit. You can do anything like this. All the same things that you do inside your academic job, you can do them outside of the traditional institution in a context that you have complete control over and where you could make even more money potentially than you do right now. Another sort of sub theme about institutional betrayal had to do, unsurprisingly, with COVID. It came up again and again as a breaking point for people. I think for many academics, COVID and how people were treated during the pandemic is when institutions showed their hand. They proved that care and support are conditional on whether or not you serve the institution's goals and priority, and your loyalty, your willingness to put your courses online overnight when the pandemic hits and to make all the accommodations that the institution required and that the students required. You're loyal and you make it happen because you believe in your institution and you believe in your purpose in serving that institution. But when the institution decided they were running out of money and it was time for you to go back to the classroom, they betrayed you. They didn't make students wear masks. They didn't care that you had somebody at home who was chronically ill. They didn't care that you had children who weren't vaccinated yet because there was no vaccine for children. They didn't care. All they care about is that you give all of yourself to them and they betray you when you need it the most. Faculty were asked during the pandemic to absorb all the risk, to do more with less, to keep things running while leadership insulated itself. And once you see this clearly, it completely changes how you relate to your institution. Several respondents described this realization as heartbreak, as grief for the version of academia that they believed in, as grief for the promises they had built their lives around. This is why I think so many people feel conflicted about leaving. They're not just walking away from a job. You are mourning a relationship that turned out to be nothing like what you were promised it would be. Theme number 5. This is the final theme in the data set. I think that this is not as a dramatic or extreme theme, right? It's not, these points are not as dramatic or extreme as burnout is destroying my health, but I think it is equally important. Underneath the burnout and the lack of fair pay and the unstable job market and the toxic culture, all of those things very serious. But I think what's happening underneath all of that is that people are starting to realize that they want a life that looks different. They want a job and a career that fits smoothly into that life. They want to stop compromising everything in their life outside of their work for their job. For years, if not decades, we sacrifice our children, our partner, our parents, our friends, our communities, our own desires, our own hobbies, our own interests, leisure reading, reading a fiction book, whatever. We sacrifice everything about our lives to our career for the sake of our career and our institution and our students and blah, blah, blah. We give it all up. And that is not a way to live your life. Your life should be rich and complex, and it should involve hobbies and travel and time spent with loved ones and weekends where you lay around and do nothing but watch movies and days where you take the afternoon off to go for a hike or to go see a movie or to whatever. That is life. That life is to be lived and to be enjoyed and to be rejoiced in. Because what the hell are we doing? Look at the world. Look at the world, this country, the world that we're in. What are we doing with our lives? Who knows what is going to happen tomorrow or next week or next month or next year? Who knows? Why are we sacrificing everything in our lives that bring us joy for this job? It's just a job. It's just a way to pay the bills. You deserve agency. You deserve the flexibility that you were always promised and never got. You deserve to have all of these things in your life. There's a couple of small quotes here. Somebody wrote, searching for a more flexible work life balance outside of traditional academia. Work life balance was a huge thing that came up over and over again. Somebody else wrote, I want work that fits my life. Somebody wrote, I need flexibility. I said this theme isn't as dramatic or as huge as like the burnout and the health and all that stuff, but it's reasonable, right? Isn't it reasonable to expect that our jobs aren't going to take over 99% of our lives? Isn't that just like, that's just reasonable? People talked a lot about caregiving responsibilities, about chronic illness and parenting and wanting to live near their family and wanting to live somewhere that isn't dictated by the job market, wanting to live somewhere that you enjoy. If you're not a city person, you're going to want to have flexibility to live somewhere else. If you're not a rural person, you're going to want to have flexibility to live in the city of your choice. You deserve that. You deserve to have control over your schedule. You deserve to work from home if you want to. It's 2026 for crying out loud. Stop bending your entire life around an institution that betrays you. Okay, I'm going to wrap up. I'm going to give you some hope. Okay, we're going to wrap this up on a positive note. I could go on for days about this stuff, of course, you know this. What I see in these data is that people still want to teach. You still want to mentor. You still want to write and research and contribute to knowledge and scholarship. You still want to participate in the life of the mind as which is, I think, what we go into academia for, to think, to write, to teach. But you want to do all of that in a way and in a context that allows you to be a whole human being without feeling guilty about it. So, how do we do that? How do we get there? When you put all of this together, the burnout, the low pay, the instability, the toxic culture, the desire for a complex and rich life that brings you joy, we find that people aren't leaving academia because you don't know how to work hard or you're scared of hard work. That's not it at all. You aren't leaving because you're not committed. And you certainly aren't leaving because you don't care. You're leaving because the system no longer works. And what I want to emphasize here is that wanting something different, wanting to do all this work you love in a different context, does not mean that you stop being an academic. You will always have your PhD or your degree. No one can take that from you. You can always continue to identify as an academic. I do. There's an episode we have on academic identity where I talked with Tori Waber and Jen Polk about this. You can go check that out if you want. But your identity doesn't have to change just because your job title or your institution does. The next step that you take doesn't have to be a complete reinvention. It can be a shift. Building an academic business, whether it's as an editor, as a coach, as a mentor, as a tutor, as a consultant, whatever, it's about taking the skills that you already have and using them in a context where you're respected and where your pay truly reflects your skills and expertise. What does that look like? It looks like getting paid to help scholars strengthen their writing and get published. It looks like coaching students or faculty in productivity or maintaining efficient writing or other work habits. It looks like helping people on the job market, helping people get tenure. It looks like supporting people who are burnt out. Maybe you have a strategy that helped you fight burnout. You can share that with other people. You can teach that to them. It looks like anything you want it to look like. If you have a solution to a problem and other people face that problem and they're willing to pay you to help them solve it, that's all it takes. You just need to know who your ideal clients are, and you need to come up with an offer or a service to sell them. And believe me, there are thousands and thousands of people out there who are still in academia who need your help. Having a business, though, also looks like choosing your own clients and saying no to people you don't want to work with. You don't have to put up with the abuse anymore. It looks like setting boundaries around your time and your energy, going on vacation, and finally leaving your laptop at home. And it means building an income that isn't tied to a single institution's budget or its politics. An academic business doesn't magically fix everything, and it does take work to build. But the one thing it does, for sure, is address the problems that you heard in this episode. So you get autonomy where you had none. You get stability where there was constant uncertainty. And yes, even having a business, you do have more stability because you control your future. You control how you market to clients. You control the services you offer. And if you learn through a program like BAE how to market yourself effectively in a way that makes you feel good and not gross, you can have stability. Your compensation reflects your expertise. And you finally get the flexibility to build the life that works for you. Most of all, having an academic business gives you options. If anything you heard today resonated with you, I want you to know that you are not imagining these things. These are real problems. They are real systemic problems. You are not alone. You are not broken. There is nothing wrong with you for knowing that you're meant for more. If you have any questions, please get in touch. Send me an email or a DM on LinkedIn. I love to chat with folks who reach out to me. And if you want to explore your options for an academic business, download my free workbook to map your academic business. Go to acadiaediting.com/map. See you next week.
If you're unhappy in academia and you think you might be a good editor or writing coach, check out my course, Becoming an Academic Editor. This digital course is paired with a 12-week group coaching program to support you through your decision to leave academia or not, and to start building a profitable and rewarding academic editing business. Learn more by going to acadiaediting.com/become an editor. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.